Commander Sarah Mitchell walked through the military base with quiet confidence. At 32, she had earned her place as one of the most respected SEAL unit commanders in the Navy. Her short brown hair was always perfectly styled, and her uniform pressed to perfection. But today she wasn't wearing her uniform. She was dressed in simple civilian clothes, jeans and a plain t-shirt. Sarah had just returned from a 6-month classified mission overseas. The base felt different somehow. New faces everywhere, young recruits who didn't know who she was. She preferred it that way sometimes, walking around without the weight of her rank, without the immediate respect and fear that came with her position. She made her way to the women's shower facility after a long day of debriefing meetings. The hot water would feel good after sitting in conference rooms for hours, discussing mission details that would remain classified for years to come. As she gathered her toiletries from her temporary quarters, she noticed how quiet the base seemed. Most of the senior officers had gone home for the evening. The shower building was nearly empty when she arrived. Sarah could hear voices echoing from inside, young women talking and laughing. She smiled to herself. These must be some of the new female recruits she'd heard about. The military was changing slowly but surely. More women were joining the ranks, and Sarah was proud to be paving the way for them. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The conversation stopped immediately. 3 young women, probably in their early 20s, turned to look at her. They were still in their training uniforms, sweaty from what looked like a long day of physical training. Their faces showed surprise, then something else, something darker. Sarah nodded politely and moved toward an empty locker. She could feel their eyes following her every movement. The silence stretched uncomfortably. She'd been in situations like this before. Sometimes new recruits felt awkward around people they didn't recognize. She decided to break the tension. "Long day of training?" she asked casually, pulling her towel from her bag. The tallest of the 3, a blonde woman with sharp features, stepped forward. "You're not supposed to be here," she said coldly. Sarah paused, confused. "I'm sorry?" "This facility is for military personnel only," another one chimed in. She had dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and crossed her arms over her chest. "Civilians aren't allowed." Sarah looked down at her civilian clothes and understood the mistake. She almost smiled. "There's been a misunderstanding. I am military personnel." The third woman, shorter with red hair, laughed harshly. "Right, and I'm the president. You don't look like any soldier I've ever seen." The blonde stepped closer, her voice getting louder. "Listen, lady, we don't know how you got onto this base, but you need to leave now." Sarah remained calm. She'd dealt with aggressive situations before, though usually in combat zones, not in a shower facility on her own base. "I understand the confusion, but I assure you I belong here just as much as you do." "Prove it," the dark-haired woman demanded. "Show us your military ID." Sarah realized her ID was in her uniform back in her quarters. She'd changed quickly after the debriefing, eager to wash away the stress of the day. "My identification is in my other clothes. But if you'd just let me explain—" "No explanations," the blonde interrupted. "We're not falling for whatever game you're playing. This is a secure military facility, and we take security very seriously here." The situation was escalating quickly. Sarah could see the determination in their eyes. These young women thought they were protecting their base from an intruder. In a way, she was proud of their vigilance, even if it was misdirected. "I appreciate your dedication to security," Sarah said carefully. "But you're making a mistake." "The only mistake here is yours," the redhead said, moving to block the exit. "Coming onto a military base where you don't belong." Sarah found herself surrounded by the 3 women. They formed a loose triangle around her, their postures aggressive and ready for confrontation. She could easily handle all 3 of them if it came to physical confrontation. Her SEAL training had prepared her for much worse situations. But she didn't want to hurt these young recruits who were just trying to do what they thought was right. "Look," she said, raising her hands in a peaceful gesture. "Why don't we call the base security? They can sort this out quickly and easily." "Oh, we will," the blonde said with a cold smile. "But first you're coming with us. We're going to make sure you don't cause any trouble while we wait for them to arrive." Sarah realized this situation was about to get much more complicated. These 3 women had no idea who they were dealing with. They saw a woman in civilian clothes and assumed she was a threat. They had no way of knowing that the person they were cornering was actually their superior officer. Someone who had commanded some of the most dangerous and successful missions in recent military history. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, a decorated SEAL commander being confronted by 3 recruits in a shower facility because she'd chosen to dress casually for once. She could reveal her identity right now, show them the respect her rank commanded. But something made her hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity about how far they would take this. Maybe it was a desire to see how these new recruits would handle what they perceived as a security threat. Or maybe deep down, she wanted to see if they had what it would take to be real soldiers. The tension in the room continued to build as the 3 women closed in around her. The blonde woman, who seemed to be the leader of the group, stepped even closer to Sarah. "We're going to escort you to the security office. Move slowly and keep your hands where we can see them." Sarah almost laughed at the absurdity of the situation. She'd been given orders by subordinates who had no idea they were talking to someone who could have them all reassigned with a single phone call. But she was curious now. She wanted to see how this would play out, and if I refuse? She asked calmly. The dark-haired woman moved to her left side. "Then we'll make sure you come with us anyway. We're trained for situations like this." Sarah glanced at each of them. They were young, probably fresh out of basic training, but they moved with some coordination. Their positioning wasn't terrible, though she could see several ways to break free if needed. More importantly, she could see the determination in their eyes. They genuinely believed they were protecting their base. "What are your names?" Sarah asked suddenly. The question seemed to catch them off guard. The redhead answered first almost automatically. "Private Jennifer Walsh." "Private Lisa Chen," the dark-haired woman added, seeming to regret sharing the information immediately. The blonde hesitated longer. "Private Amanda Foster. And that's all you need to know." Sarah nodded slowly. "Well, Private Foster, Private Chen, Private Walsh, I have to say your situational awareness needs work." "What's that supposed to mean?" Foster snapped. "If I were really a security threat, do you think I'd be standing here having a conversation with you? Do you think I'd have walked calmly into a shower facility in broad daylight? Do you think I'd be asking for your names?" Chen frowned. "It could be part of your cover story." "My cover story?" Sarah couldn't hide her amusement now. "And what exactly do you think I'm covering for?" "Could be anything," Walsh said. "Could be espionage, could be terrorism, could be you're working with enemies of the state." Sarah shook her head. "You've been watching too many movies. Real security threats don't usually announce themselves by showing up in shower facilities asking about training days." Foster's jaw tightened. "We're not taking any chances. The security of this base is our responsibility." "Actually," Sarah said quietly, "it's not." "What?" "The security of this base is not your responsibility. You're trainees, recruits. Your responsibility is to follow orders and learn how to become soldiers." The 3 women exchanged glances. Foster's face was getting red with anger. "You don't know anything about what our responsibilities are." Sarah studied them more carefully. They were so young, so eager to prove themselves. She remembered being like that once, desperate to show that she belonged in a world that didn't always welcome women. But there was something else here, something that made her pay closer attention to their behavior. "How long have you been on this base?" she asked. "That's not your business," Chen replied sharply. 2 weeks, Walsh answered, earning glares from the other 2. 2 weeks, Sarah repeated. "And in those 2 weeks, how many security breaches have you encountered?" Foster stepped forward aggressively. "Stop asking questions. You're the one who needs to answer them." But Sarah could see uncertainty creeping into their expressions. They were starting to wonder if maybe they'd made a mistake. The problem was they'd gone too far to back down now without losing face. "Here's what I think happened," Sarah said, keeping her voice calm and steady. "You 3 are new here. You're eager to prove yourselves, to show that you can handle responsibility. When you saw someone you didn't recognize in civilian clothes, you decided this was your chance to demonstrate your value to the base." "You're wrong," Foster said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Tell me, have any of you actually completed security training yet? Do you know the proper protocols for handling suspected intruders?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Sarah continued, "Because if you had completed that training, you would know that the first step is to verify identity before taking any action. You would know that you should have called for backup immediately, and you would know that cornering a suspected threat in an enclosed space is exactly what you're not supposed to do." Chen and Walsh were looking increasingly uncomfortable, but Foster remained defiant. We know enough to handle one middle-aged woman who wandered onto our base." "Middle-aged?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. She was only 32, but she supposed to these young women, anyone over 25 probably seemed old. "Look," she said, deciding to give them one more chance to back down gracefully. "I understand what you're trying to do here, and your hearts are in the right place, but you're making a serious error in judgment. Why don't we just call this a misunderstanding and move on?" Foster shook her head stubbornly. "No, we're following through with this. You're coming with us to security, and they can figure out who you are and how you got here." Sarah sighed. She'd given them multiple opportunities to de-escalate the situation, but they seemed determined to see it through to the end. Part of her admired their persistence, even if it was completely misdirected. "All right," she said finally. "If that's how you want to handle this, then let's go." The three women seemed surprised that she was agreeing so easily. They'd expected more resistance, just like that, Walsh asked suspiciously. "Just like that," Sarah confirmed. "You want to take me to security? Fine, let's go to security. But I want you to remember this moment because in about 10 minutes, you're going to learn a very important lesson about making assumptions." Foster tried to maintain her authoritative posture, but Sarah could see the first hints of doubt creeping into her expression. "What kind of lesson?" Sarah smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something the others didn't, someone who was about to turn the tables in a very dramatic way. "You'll see," she said simply. The walk to the security office was awkward and tense. Foster took the lead with Sarah in the middle, and Chen and Walsh flanking her on either side. They moved through the base like they were escorting a dangerous criminal, drawing curious stares from other personnel they passed. Sarah noticed several familiar faces among the evening crew, senior officers and longtime base personnel who recognized her immediately. Even in civilian clothes, she caught the eye of Sergeant Major Rodriguez, a man she'd worked with on multiple missions. His face showed complete confusion as he watched her being marched across the base by 3 recruits. She gave him a subtle shake of her head, a signal to stay back and let this play out. Rodriguez frowned but didn't interfere, though she could see him reaching for his radio, probably to alert base command about the strange situation unfolding. "Keep moving," Foster said, apparently noticing Sarah's exchange with Rodriguez. "No communicating with anyone." "I wasn't communicating," Sarah replied. "I was just acknowledging someone I know." "Right," Chen said sarcastically. "I'm sure you know lots of people on a military base you're not supposed to be on." They reached the security office, a small building near the main gate. Foster pushed open the door and motioned for Sarah to go inside first. The office was quiet except for the hum of computers and radio chatter. Behind the main desk sat Corporal Martinez, a young man Sarah had met briefly during her previous assignments to this base. Martinez looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from boredom to confusion to recognition in the span of about 2 seconds. His mouth actually fell open when he saw Sarah being escorted by the 3 recruits. "Commander Mitchell," he said, starting to stand. "Commander?" Foster spun around to look at Sarah, her face pale. Sarah held up a hand to stop Martinez from saying anything else. "It's all right, Corporal. These recruits believe they've apprehended an intruder. I'd like you to handle this situation by the book." Martinez looked completely bewildered. He glanced back and forth between Sarah and the 3 recruits, trying to process what was happening. "Ma'am, I'm not sure I understand." Foster found her voice first. "This woman was found in the shower facility without proper identification. She claims to be military personnel, but she's dressed in civilian clothes and couldn't provide credentials when asked." "I see," Martinez said slowly. He was clearly trying to figure out how to handle a situation where 3 recruits had essentially arrested their commanding officer. "And you are?" "Private Foster, Private Chen, and Private Walsh," Foster answered. "We're conducting our duties as assigned personnel on this base." Martinez nodded, though Sarah could see he was struggling not to smile. "Well, let's sort this out properly then. Ma'am, could you provide identification?" Sarah reached for her back pocket, but Foster immediately tensed. "Slowly!" "It's just my wallet," Sarah said calmly. She pulled out a simple black wallet and handed it to Martinez. He opened it and pulled out her military ID, examining it carefully. "Commander Sarah Mitchell, United States Navy SEAL," he read aloud. "Security clearance level." He paused and looked at Sarah. "Ma'am, should I read this part aloud?" "That's not necessary, Corporal." Foster snatched the ID from Martinez's hands, staring at it in disbelief. This could be fake. Anyone can make fake identification these days. Martinez pulled up something on his computer, typing rapidly. Let me just verify this through the system. He waited a moment, then nodded. Identity confirmed. Commander Sarah Mitchell, currently assigned to SEAL Team Alpha, recently returned from classified overseas deployment. The color drained completely from Foster's face. Chen and Walsh stood frozen, realizing the magnitude of their mistake. But Foster wasn't ready to give up yet. Even if she is who she says she is, she still violated protocol by being in the facility without proper identification visible, she said desperately. Sarah turned to look at her fully for the first time since entering the security office. When she spoke, her voice carried a tone of command that none of the recruits had heard before. Private Foster, let me explain something to you about protocol. When a commanding officer is on their own base in their off-duty hours, they are not required to display identification at all times. The requirement you're referring to applies to visitors and temporary personnel. Foster opened her mouth to argue, but Sarah continued. Furthermore, the protocol for handling suspected security breaches requires you to immediately contact security personnel, rather than attempting to handle the situation yourself. By cornering what you believe to be an intruder, you put yourselves and others at risk. Chen finally spoke up, her voice small. We were just trying to protect the base, ma'am. Sarah's expression softened slightly. I understand that, Private Chen, and I appreciate the intention. But good intentions don't excuse poor execution. Martinez cleared his throat. Commander, would you like me to file a report on this incident? Sarah considered this for a moment. An official report would go on these recruits' permanent records. It could affect their careers before they'd really even begun. On the other hand, they needed to understand the seriousness of what they'd done. Tell me, Corporal Martinez, what does regulations say about the proper handling of this type of mistake? Martinez consulted his manual. Depending on the severity and the intent, it could range from additional training requirements to formal disciplinary action. Walsh was starting to tear up. Chen looked sick to her stomach. Foster was still trying to maintain some dignity, but Sarah could see that the reality of the situation was finally sinking in. However, Sarah continued, I'm more interested in making sure this doesn't happen again than I am in punishment. She turned to face all three recruits directly. Do you understand what you did wrong here? Yes, ma'am, they answered in unison, though Foster's response came a beat later than the others. Tell me, Chen spoke first. We should have called for backup immediately instead of trying to handle it ourselves. We should have asked for identification before making assumptions, Walsh added quietly. Foster was silent for a long moment. Finally, she said, we let our desire to prove ourselves override our training and common sense. Sarah nodded. That's exactly right. And that kind of thinking can get people killed in real combat situations. Sarah walked around the security office, letting the weight of her words sink in. The three recruits stood at attention now, their earlier bravado completely gone. Martinez watched the scene unfold with professional interest, clearly learning something himself about leadership and correction. Sit down, Sarah told the recruits. They quickly found chairs, sitting with perfect posture despite their civilian surroundings. I want to tell you about a mission I was on 2 years ago in Afghanistan. She pulled up a chair opposite them, her posture relaxed but her voice carrying the authority of experience. My team was tasked with extracting a high-value target from a compound in hostile territory. Intelligence said the compound would be lightly guarded, maybe 3 or 4 enemies maximum. Foster, Chen, and Walsh listened intently, grateful for any distraction from their embarrassment. My team consisted of 4 highly trained SEALs, each with years of combat experience. We approached the compound at night, confident in our abilities and our intelligence. But when we got there, something felt wrong. Sarah paused, remembering. The compound was too quiet, too easy. My instinct told me we were walking into a trap, but the intelligence was clear and my team was eager to complete the mission quickly. What happened? Walsh asked quietly. We proceeded according to plan, and we walked straight into an ambush. What intelligence had told us was a lightly guarded compound turned out to be a well-planned trap, with over 20 enemy fighters waiting for us. The recruits leaned forward, completely absorbed in the story. 2 of my team members were wounded in the first few seconds of contact. We were pinned down, outgunned, and fighting for our lives. The only thing that saved us was years of training that had taught us how to adapt when things went wrong. Sarah looked directly at Foster. Do you know what would have happened if my team had panicked? If they had let their emotions override their training, you would have been killed. Foster answered, her voice barely above a whisper. All of us would have been killed. And the high-value target we were supposed to extract would have remained in enemy hands, potentially costing more lives down the road. Sarah stood up and began pacing slowly. The point of that story is this: in the military, there are no small mistakes. Every decision you make, every action you take has consequences. Sometimes those consequences are minor, like 3 recruits embarrassing themselves in a security office. Sometimes they're major, like getting your entire team killed. Chen wiped her eyes. We understand, ma'am. Do you? Because I need to know that you really understand. This isn't about hurt feelings or wounded pride. This is about the fact that someday, you might be in a situation where someone's life depends on your ability to follow protocol and think clearly under pressure. Sarah returned to her chair and leaned forward. Tell me about your training so far. What have you learned about decision-making under stress? Walsh answered first. We've learned about the importance of staying calm and following established procedures. And what did you do today? We panicked, Foster admitted finally. We saw something that didn't look right, and instead of following procedures, we decided to handle it ourselves. Why? Foster struggled with the answer. Because we wanted to prove that we belonged here. We wanted to show that we could handle responsibility. Sarah nodded. And how did that work out for you? It nearly ended our careers before they started, Chen said quietly. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But that depends on what you do next. The recruits looked up with hope in their eyes. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah continued. Corporal Martinez is going to file a report of this incident. It will note that 3 recruits identified what they believed to be a security issue and took action, but that they failed to follow proper protocol in handling the situation. Martinez nodded and began typing. However, Sarah said, and the recruits perked up slightly. The report will also note that when confronted with their error, all 3 recruits acknowledged their mistakes, accepted responsibility, and demonstrated a clear understanding of how to handle similar situations in the future. Ma'am, Foster asked hesitantly, what this means is that you're going to get additional training. You're going to spend the next 2 weeks learning every single security protocol this base uses. You're going to practice proper identification procedures, proper escalation procedures, and proper threat assessment. The recruits nodded eagerly. You're also going to write a detailed report analyzing your actions today, identifying what you did wrong, and explaining how you would handle the same situation if it happened again. That report will become part of your training file. Yes, ma'am, they said in unison. Sarah's expression softened slightly. I'm not trying to end your careers. I'm trying to save them. The military needs people who are willing to take initiative and show leadership, but it needs people who can do those things while still following proper procedures and maintaining discipline. She stood up again, and the recruits immediately came to attention. The fact that you were willing to confront what you saw as a security threat shows courage. The fact that you worked together shows teamwork. The fact that you're here on this base working to become soldiers shows commitment. Those are all good qualities. Foster looked directly at Sarah for the first time since learning her identity. How do we make sure this never happens again? Sarah smiled, a real smile this time. You remember this feeling. You remember how it felt to realize you'd made a serious mistake. And you use that memory to make better decisions in the future. 2 weeks later, Sarah was reviewing training reports in her office when there was a knock on her door. She looked up to see the 3 recruits standing in the doorway, looking nervous but determined. Come in, she said, setting aside her paperwork. Foster, Chen, and Walsh entered and stood at attention. Foster held a thick folder in her hands. Ma'am, we've completed the additional training you assigned and we've prepared our incident report, Foster said formally. At ease, Sarah replied. Have a seat. They sat down, still maintaining perfect posture. Sarah could see the change in them immediately. 2 weeks ago they had been eager but undisciplined. Now they carried themselves like real soldiers. Tell me about your training, Sarah said. Chen spoke first. We completed 40 hours of security protocol training with Sergeant Torres. We learned proper identification procedures, threat assessment protocols, and escalation chains of command. We also completed additional physical training focused on situational awareness and team coordination. Walsh added. Foster handed over the folder. This is our complete analysis of the incident, including individual reports from each of us and a joint assessment of how we should have handled the situation differently. Sarah opened the folder and scanned the first few pages. The writing was clear, detailed, and showed genuine understanding of their mistakes. More importantly, it showed they had learned from those mistakes. I'm impressed, she said. This is thorough work. Ma'am? Foster asked. May we ask you something? Go ahead. Why didn't you just tell us who you were from the beginning? You could have ended the whole situation immediately. Sarah leaned back in her chair, considering the question. That's a fair question. The truth is, I was curious to see how you would handle what you perceived as a real security situation. I wanted to understand what kind of soldiers you had the potential to become. And? Chen asked. And I learned that you have good instincts, strong teamwork, and genuine commitment to protecting your base. You also learned that you need to balance those qualities with proper training and discipline. Walsh looked thoughtful. Did we pass or fail? Sarah smiled. You failed the test you thought you were taking. But you passed a much more important test, the one that came after. When confronted with your mistakes, you didn't make excuses, you didn't blame others, and you didn't give up. You took responsibility and worked to improve. She stood up and walked to the window overlooking the training grounds. Do you see those recruits out there running drills? The three women joined her at the window. Below, another group of new recruits was struggling through an obstacle course, some succeeding, others falling behind. Some of them will wash out, Sarah continued. Some will make it through basic training but never become real soldiers. And some will develop into the kind of people you want watching your back in a combat situation. How do you tell the difference? Foster asked. By how they handle failure, by whether they learn from their mistakes or repeat them, by whether they can admit when they're wrong and work to get better. Sarah returned to her desk and pulled out 3 sets of papers. These are your new assignments. The recruits accepted the papers eagerly, then their expressions changed as they read. Advanced security training? Chen said with surprise. Leadership development program? Walsh added. Foster looked up from her papers with confusion and hope. Ma'am, these are advanced programs. We're just basic recruits. Not anymore, Sarah said. Based on your performance over the past 2 weeks and based on your response to correction, I'm recommending all 3 of you for accelerated training programs. The 3 women stared at her in shock. But we messed up, Foster protested. We arrested our commanding officer. Yes, you did. And then you learned from it, took responsibility for it, and demonstrated that you could grow from the experience. Those are exactly the qualities the military needs in its future leaders. Sarah sat back down and looked at each of them seriously. This doesn't mean you're getting special treatment. These programs are harder than regular training. The standards are higher, the expectations are greater, and the margin for error is smaller. We understand, Chen said quickly. Do you? Because if you accept these positions, you're not just representing yourselves anymore. You're representing me since I'm the one recommending you. If you fail, it reflects on my judgment. The weight of responsibility settled over the 3 recruits. They exchanged glances, communicating silently. Foster spoke for the group. Ma'am, we won't let you down. I believe you won't, but more importantly, I believe you won't let yourselves down. You've already shown that you can overcome failure and become stronger because of it. Sarah pulled out one more document. There's one more thing. I'm also recommending that you 3 be assigned to work together as a unit during your advanced training. You've already developed good teamwork, and I think you can learn to complement each other's strengths and cover for each other's weaknesses. Really? Walsh asked, her excitement breaking through her military composure. Really. But remember, this is still conditional on your continued performance and development. The 3 recruits stood up and came to attention again. Foster spoke formally. Ma'am, thank you for this opportunity. We won't forget the lesson we learned, and we won't forget that you gave us a second chance when we didn't deserve it. Sarah stood as well. You earned this second chance. I just recognized it. The rest is up to you. As they turned to leave, Sarah called after them. One more thing. From now on, when you see someone in civilian clothes in a military facility, what's the first thing you do? Verify their authorization to be there through proper channels, they answered in unison. And if they can't immediately provide identification? We maintain visual contact while calling for backup and following established escalation procedures. Good. Dismissed. The 3 recruits left her office with, smiles on their faces and purpose in their steps. Sarah watched them go, thinking about the lesson they had all learned. Sometimes the biggest mistakes could become the foundation for the greatest growth, if handled with wisdom and grace. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the base auditorium watching the graduation ceremony for the advanced training program. The hall was filled with proud families, military officials, and fellow soldiers celebrating the achievements of the newest graduates. She spotted Foster, Chen, and Walsh in the front row of graduates, their uniforms pristine and their bearing confident but humble. They had not only completed the advanced program, but had graduated in the top 10% of their class. Admiral Harrison, the base commander, stepped up to the podium to give the keynote address. Today we celebrate not just the completion of training, but the transformation of individuals into leaders, he began. These graduates have demonstrated exceptional commitment, skill, and character. Sarah remembered her own graduation ceremony years ago, the pride and nervousness she had felt stepping into greater responsibility. She hoped these new graduates felt the same sense of purpose and possibility. I want to highlight a particular group of graduates today, Admiral Harrison continued, who exemplify the kind of growth and resilience we hope to see in all our personnel. Sarah saw Foster. Chen and Walsh exchanged glances, wondering if he was referring to them. 6 months ago, 3 recruits made a significant error in judgment. They violated protocol in a way that could have had serious consequences. But rather than allowing that mistake to define them, they used it as motivation to become better soldiers. The Admiral's eyes found the 3 women in the audience. Privates Foster, Chen, and Walsh, please stand. The 3 recruits rose to their feet, their faces showing a mixture of pride and nervousness at being singled out. These 3 soldiers not only completed their remedial training with distinction, they went on to excel in our most challenging advanced programs. They have demonstrated that failure is not the end of the road, but rather an opportunity for growth and improvement. The audience applauded, but Sarah could see the real emotion on the faces of the 3 graduates. They were thinking about that day in the shower facility, about how close they had come to ruining their careers before they had really begun. Moreover, the Admiral continued, they have shown exceptional teamwork and leadership potential. Their instructors report that they consistently helped their fellow trainees, shared their knowledge freely, and maintained the highest standards of conduct throughout their training. Sarah felt a surge of pride. She had been right to give them a second chance, but more importantly, they had been worthy of that chance. Admiral Harrison concluded his speech and began calling names for individual recognition. When Foster's name was called, she walked across the stage with confidence and precision. When she shook the Admiral's hand, Sarah could see her whisper something to him, and he nodded with understanding. Chen and Walsh followed, each receiving their advanced certifications and commendations for excellence in training. Sarah noticed that all 3 of them scanned the audience until they found her, each giving her a small, respectful nod of acknowledgement. After the ceremony, Sarah made her way through the crowd toward the graduates. Before she reached them, Admiral Harrison intercepted her. "Commander Mitchell," he said with a warm smile, "I wanted to thank you personally for the way you handled that situation 6 months ago. Those 3 have become some of our finest graduates. They did the work, sir. I just gave them the opportunity. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need more of. Speaking of which, I have something to discuss with you." He pulled her aside from the crowd. "I'm recommending you for promotion to full colonel, with command of the new joint training facility we're establishing." Sarah was surprised. "Sir, I appreciate the confidence, but I'm happy with my current position." "I know you are, but these 3 soldiers aren't the only ones who need good leadership. We're seeing more women entering combat roles, and they need mentors who understand both the challenges and the opportunities they'll face." Before Sarah could respond, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see Foster, Chen, and Walsh approaching, still in their dress uniforms but with genuine smiles replacing their formal military bearing. "Ma'am," Foster said, "we wanted to thank you before we receive our new assignments." "There's nothing to thank me for. You earned everything you achieved today." Chen stepped forward. "With respect, ma'am, that's not entirely true. You could have ended our careers that day. Instead, you chose to teach us a lesson that made us better soldiers. And better people," Walsh added quietly. Admiral Harrison watched the interaction with interest. "I take it these are the 3 recruits from the shower incident?" "Yes, sir," Foster answered, her cheeks reddening slightly at the memory. Well, you should know that your story has become part of our leadership training curriculum. We use it as an example of how to turn mistakes into learning opportunities. The three women looked shocked. Our story is being taught to other soldiers? Chen asked. With your permission, of course, Sarah said, and with all identifying details removed. But yes, it's become a valuable teaching tool about the importance of proper protocol and the value of second chances. Walsh looked thoughtful. Ma'am, can I ask what you learned from that day? I mean, we obviously learned a lot, but did it teach you anything? Sarah considered the question carefully. It reminded me that leadership isn't just about giving orders or maintaining discipline. Sometimes it's about recognizing potential in people, even when they can't see it in themselves. Foster straightened up. Ma'am, we received our assignments today. We're all being posted to different bases for our next phase of training. That's to be expected. You need to develop your individual skills before you can work effectively as a unit again. Will we work together again? Chen asked hopefully. If your careers develop the way I think they will, yes. The military is smaller than you might think. Good soldiers tend to find their way back to each other eventually. Admiral Harrison cleared his throat. Actually, that brings up something interesting. Commander Mitchell, your new position would give you some influence over assignments and unit formations. Sarah looked at him suspiciously. Sir, are you trying to use these three to convince me to accept the promotion? He smiled. Is it working? Sarah looked at Foster, Chen, and Walsh, seeing not the confused, overeager recruits from 6 months ago, but confident, capable soldiers ready to serve their country. You know what? It might be. The three graduates exchanged excited glances. But, Sarah continued, that doesn't change anything for you three. You still need to prove yourselves in your individual assignments. No special treatment, no shortcuts, no relying on past connections. We wouldn't want it any other way. Ma'am? Foster said firmly. As the crowd began to thin out around them, Sarah felt a sense of completion. The incident that had started with such confusion and potential disaster had led to growth for everyone involved. The recruits had learned valuable lessons about discipline and protocol. She had learned about the importance of mentorship and second chances, and now all of them were moving forward to new challenges and opportunities. One last thing, Sarah said as the three prepared to leave. That day in the shower facility, you told me I didn't look like any soldier you'd ever seen. What do you think now? Foster smiled, the first truly relaxed expression Sarah had ever seen on her face. Ma'am, I think you look exactly like what a soldier should look like. Someone who's strong enough to face any challenge, wise enough to learn from mistakes, and caring enough to help others become their best selves. Sarah nodded, satisfied. Good answer, Private Foster. Good luck to all of you. As she watched them walk away, Sarah realized that the real victory that day hadn't been avoiding discipline or maintaining her authority. It had been the moment when three young women learned that failure could be the beginning of success, and that true strength came from admitting mistakes and working to overcome them. The shower incident, as it would forever be known in base lore, had become more than just a story about miscommunication. It had become a testament to the power of good leadership, second chances, and the incredible potential that could be unlocked when people were willing to learn from their mistakes and grow beyond them.